All right, we are back for round two. Let's do this. Getting straight back into it. So we've got a question here from Frank Fitness. How much set volume per week for both major and minor muscle groups? And the best way to get the volume in if only lifting 2 or 3 times a week. Now, Frank's a great guy, by the way. He's really supportive. Been with the channel since the beginning. So shout out to Frank. Now, in terms of set volume, I mostly answered that in the first Q&A, so have a look at that. However, what I will do is, I don't want to go off on that rant again. No one wants to hear that. So what I will do is I will talk about some better ways to get in volume, which I found to be very effective, and the science shows to be somewhat kind of equal. So one thing I'm really liking, and I have been liking for a while, is drop sets, but done properly. Okay, so I did a video about intensity techniques a while back now, and I was talking about how I don't typically program them in. There are some special occasions where people have a lack of time and I want to get high amounts of volume in, but done in the right way. Now, I said in that video, so go ahead and check that out. I'll try and link it. But I said in that video, you don't want to go immediately from one set to your drop set to your next drop set. You want to try and have a little bit of time to provide some space to allow you to get your breath back to then move on. So drop sets I quite like. Now, the way that I implement them at the moment is I will do a set which will be all out, and then I'll do another drop and do another drop after something like 30 to 45 seconds. But the key point is this: I only track the first set, right? I only track the first set. So you've seen, like with the whole dog crap way of training, right? The rest pause. Everyone writes the rest pause set as 12-5-5 or whatever, right? I don't do that. I only track the first set because that's really all that matters. That will give you enough information to let you know that you progressed. Your second and third set, well, it doesn't really matter. I mean, let's say you go from doing a set of, say, 8-3-2 to doing, say, I don't know, 10-3-2. Did you progress? Of course you did. Do you need to know what you did on your second and third set? You don't really. So what I don't want to see, now the reason that I do this is not because of laziness, because after you've done your set, your only priority needs to be resting. Now imagine this: you've done an all-out set of, say, rows or chins, right? Now in that space of, say, 30 seconds you've got to rest, which is not a long time when you're gassed. You're trying to suck in air and you can barely remember how much you've done in the first set. So let's say you got, I don't know, bodyweight chins for 12 reps. Fantastic, right? You have to remember that. You have to remember that for 30 seconds, and then you've got to go and do your next set, and then you've got to go remember that next set. What did you do on the next set? Well, I did like 3. And on top of that, you've got to remember what you did on the next set. And okay, let's say we're going to write it down. So in 30 seconds, you've got to rest, breathe, remember, and write down. Let's just get rid of that, okay? Just track what you did in the first set, and then the second and third set, they're still giving you a stimulus. You just don't need to track them. You don't need to track them. There's no point. So I've implemented drop sets like that, and it's made my life so much easier. Just focus on the top set, because the second and third set is just adding volume. You track your strength development in that first big hitter set. And to be fair, you could argue, going off onto a different tangent here, I'm not sure what I want to talk about this, but I'll touch on it briefly. You can argue that the first set is a lot more indicative of your actual strength development. Your second and third sets sometimes more indicative of your body's ability to store glycogen and have endurance, which is different to actual strength and muscle development. But that's a slightly different point, which might be a bit controversial. So anyway, that's one tip for drop sets. Another thing that I like to do is like extended sets. So I'll have like a rep target. I know that Steve Shaw from Massive Iron does this as well. He has like a 25 rep set. I go a little bit higher. So I go like a 60 rep set. And I generally go between 60 to 80 reps on, I'll say an isolation exercise, but I don't always mean a single joint exercise, but an isolation exercise. So let's say even like cable pull downs, pull downs for the back, that, or leg extensions, or chest presses. Dumbbell laterals are really good. They're really good if you want to have perfect form on an exercise. Obviously, you should have great form on every exercise, but if you want to have absolute perfect form, like let's say you're doing a pull down, you don't want your arms to get involved at all. You want it all to be in the upper back, and you want to get a contraction and you want to get a stretch. Do an extended set. Set yourself a target for 60 reps and stop the set when your form starts to break down. It's a very good technique to use on those lifts which are very dependent on you getting perfect form. Now, I will say not every exercise needs 100% perfect form. So like you just need to sometimes gut it out and get stronger. But in any case, that's a couple of techniques there which makes it a little bit easier to get in some volume. I mean, with drop sets, you can basically drop set pretty much everything, you know, or extended sets, you know, with some isolation exercises. If you're going high rep on the first set, you don't even need to drop the weight. You can just rest 30 seconds and you'll get enough recovery back. So on my lighter isolation exercises, I don't tend to do a drop set. What I'll do is I'll do a high rep first set, and then I'll just wait 30 seconds and do the same weight again. So like a cable curl, you know, or a tricep push down. There's no point dropping the weight then. So let's see. And we've got another question here from Frank. And should training be dialed back with less frequency and intensity when cutting, or should the individual try and maintain the intensity? This is a good question, and it's something which kind of, get a drink, it's something which kind of I disagree with some coaches. During lockdown, there was a large rash of coaches who were pushing like really extreme diets, you know, like PSMF style diets. And it was very popular, I guess, because people didn't have very high activity levels. So this allowed them to lose body fat during lockdown when they didn't have access to gyms, you know, all that kind of stuff. So in any case, the question was, should you reduce training intensity on a cut? I don't think you should. Okay. Now, let's say it's a long cut and you're going to start with a reasonable calorie deficit. Well, there's no point cutting exercise intensity then, right? Because you're not really cutting that hard yet. So then what if you did a mini cut? Because you cut calories harder, like 1,000 calorie deficit a day. Well, then, even then, it's debatable that you need to reduce training intensity and volume because you're only there for like 4 weeks. So I don't think there's any case to be made for immediately cutting volume, certainly not intensity. The argument made by sort of Israel and co is that it gives you a chance to resensitize yourself to higher volumes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess we could detrain ourselves during a cut. Does that really make logical sense, though? Like, I don't know. Detrain yourself during a cut? I don't know. I mean, when you're cutting, your need for training stimulus is actually higher. So you actually, and I think Mike said this himself, you actually need more minimum effective volume. So what do you end up with? Do you end up with a massively reduced workload? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, if a guy has happily been progressing with 12 sets per body part per week, cool. I don't see a need for them to reduce that. Base it on how your recovery is during the cut. First week, let's say you go into a 500 calorie deficit, you do not need to reduce intensity or training. You never need to reduce intensity, but you do not really need to reduce volume at that stage. No, it's a 500 calorie deficit. You know, geez, it's a sandwich less per day. You know, so don't do that. So yeah, my advice on that would be be reactive, just like you would, Frank. You know, just like you would. You're a good coach. You know, just like you would with your client. Just be reactive, and if the client is struggling with maintaining strength, then reduce the volume potentially and see how that goes. So that's how I would handle that. All right, next. The questions have been muddled up a little bit, but I'll try and get through them all. Okay, so we've got here a question from just another data point. For those who don't have the luxury of complete undisturbed workout sessions, how long can you go between sets without losing on effectiveness? Now, I want to take you back to 2001, the mean streets of Derby, England. I was a young kid, and there was the gym that I went to. I was actually very blessed to go to this gym because there was a number of Olympic lifters, strongmen, powerlifters, bodybuilders, and actually a sumo wrestler under the same roof. I know that sounds like an unbelievable story. It's like Faz is making this up, but I'm serious. Like Olympic lifters, they were all there. Competitive bodybuilders, competitive powerlifters, sumo wrestlers. I know the sumo wrestler sounds ridiculous, but we actually have we had a sumo wrestler, sumo Steve Pateman, who in the city that I grew up in. Crazy. But there you go. So anyway, this sumo Steve Pateman, he would rest for ages. He did the sort of Paul Anderson style of training. And basically he would do a bench press set and rest half an hour before he did another bench press set. This guy was strong, he was big. I don't know quite what he weighed, but if I was to estimate it, I would say he was probably in the region of about 300 pounds. So he was a big bloke. He was about my height. And he was obviously visibly very rotund. He was solid, but I'd say he weighed about 300 pounds. He probably wasn't as big as like 350, 400. I would guess he weighed about 300 pounds because he was lean for a sumo wrestler, but he used to go over to Japan and everything. But anyway, so he had a routine where he would basically bench press and then he would go over to the reception and play chess. So he would basically play chess all day and then every half an hour would go and do a bench press set. Insane. Absolutely insane. I can't recall whether he would warm up again or not, but he would basically, so let's say he had 8 sets of bench press to do, he would do that over 4 hours. He'd go over and play chess, and every now and again I'd play chess with him. Like if I'd finished a workout, he wanted a game. Yeah. Interesting. It would make for a nice story to tell you that he was good at chess. He wasn't. He was absolutely terrible. As a 19-year-old, I could wipe the floor with him. But in any case, he liked playing chess. So there you go. Not very good at chess, but great at lifting. So to answer your question, I think you can go a long way. I mean, during the height of my powerlifting days, I would rest regularly for 6 minutes. Not a problem. I also think if you have to interrupt your workout, go for it. Try and group together body parts. So let's say you're training upper body. Maybe purposely group together chest and back, and then come back later to do, say, delts and arms. That's what I would say. I don't think that's a problem. I have had clients do that in the past. Like previously, I used to train quite a lot of PTs. Well, and I still do actually, but yeah, and a lot of them would be in the gym all day, but they were interrupted with clients and all that kind of stuff. So if they had a quick half an hour, they would just do chest and back, and then they would come in later for like shoulders and arms or whatever, right? So it's fine to do that. It's really not a problem. As long as you're getting the work in, you're good to go. I guess what I would caution you against is trying to say, let's say you've done 2 sets of chest or 2 sets of bench press, and you've got another 2 sets to go. It might not be the best idea to come back in the afternoon and do those, because that's like a separate workout, right? It's the same workout again, and you've already stretched your chest. It's damaged. I would feel more cautious about that. I still think it's fine, but I would like you to get a body part out of the way before you hit it again. So say I'm running 5 by 5 on squats. I do 3 sets, but I'm interrupted 30 minutes. Is my workout ruined? It's definitely not ruined. No, it's definitely not ruined. Would you go and finish your sets then at that stage? I don't know. You'd have to warm up again. If it's a full 30 minutes, like you're going to have to warm up again. That's basically a workout done. I mean, I would say this, maybe, yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because you don't know when you're going to be interrupted. First thing is tell the other person to F off. But yeah, no, I think if you do that, I would probably just call it there. I'd just see if you progress next time. If it becomes a regular occurrence, then maybe look at splitting up your routine to actually ensure you're not regularly getting, if this is a regular occurrence, then you can pre-plan it. And then you can plan around this. But I think if it happens once or twice, forget it. Your workout's not ruined, by the way. Just forget it. And if you've got other things to do, then by all means, like if you've got stiff leg deadlifts, bench press to do, then sure, finish that off. But I wouldn't go back and do squats again. All right. So next question. Amanda P. What might be the reason that my natural squat stance is uneven? It doesn't feel right or comfortable with my feet or even. My right foot always ends up being further back than my left. I've been working on hip and ankle mobility, but I'm not sure it is helping. I have a hip shift to the right when it comes up from the heavier squats as well. All right, Amanda. First thing is this. We are all built slightly differently, and usually we are built with sort of imperfections and unevenness, right? So, like, for example, the example I gave in the previous video is my left leg is ever so slightly longer than my right leg, and the left kneecap is ever so slightly higher up on the knee than the other one, which is weird. And I didn't know that the whole time I was powerlifting. I just was getting consistent knee issues. I mean, this is one of the things with, the perfect athletes, the guys and girls who are at the top of the game at the Olympics. Like, they are usually a combination of some extremely precise right things, like a lot of evenness and a lot of peculiarities which make them excellent lifters. Like, give you the classic example of Lamar Gant, who is the amazing 4 times bodyweight deadlifter, and he had scoliosis. It actually helped him lift. So we all have our imperfections. Now, when it comes to why your feet feel better uneven, it's just the way you're built. That's all it is. Now, I don't personally think you should correct that if it feels bad. Go with the stance that feels comfortable. So that's what I would say. There is no ideal stance. We all have some peculiarities to lifting. And odds are, if you hadn't seen that, and if no one had pointed it out, like somebody at some point probably said, your foot stance is uneven, maybe you should fix that. You're like, oh. But odds are, if you had never really looked at it, you probably wouldn't have noticed it. Now, the hip shift is a different issue, and I do think that's a problem. The hip shift to the right, well, I think that's a problem. It's a problem depending on how visible it is, how much it is. Like if there's a bit of a sway on max attempts, if it's a full-on, sideways movement, then that's a bit more of a problem. If it's a slight, again, I don't know how closely you're looking at these things, because you have spotted the feet being uneven. So if it's a very slight hip shift to the right, then it's less of a concern. All I would say is, firstly, try and use a stance which it feels good. And secondly, if the hip shift is excessive, then I would say you continue to use weights below the point where it becomes a problem and then build up from there. Avoid doing anything which gives you the hip shift, because that will just drill the hip shift movement in. Consider it like practice. If you are consistently practicing with the hip shift, your body will learn, your mind will learn the hip shift. If you just continuously practice with no hip shift, then there is less likely chance of that happening as you move forward. So you have to drill in the form that you want to improve rather than drill in the form that you're trying to avoid. Okay, so try not to hip shift anymore. And if that means avoiding heavy weights for a while, then avoid the heavy weights. I would say as well, with regards to the degree of hip shift, yeah, I mean, maybe send me a video. Send me a video at fazlifts.co.uk. Go ahead and send me a video there and I'll take a look at it. See if it's like really bad. I mean, I'm not a physio, but I can have a look at it and offer some, just look at how bad it is from my perspective, what I've seen in the past. Next question. What do you think of training one arm like Ryan Crowley after he tore his pec? I mean, I'll answer this in 2 ways. One is how sensible he was for getting back in the gym that quickly. I mean, he re-tore his pec. I don't think that's the best idea. I think you should be active, but it just seemed like he was going at it pretty heavy. Also, I'm not sure about how wise it would be to continue to use special sports supplements if you're trying to rehab your joints. I don't know how it works, but I would assume maybe if he comes off or uses a small amount, whatever, then that might have been better. So yeah, I think he did a lot of things which were fueled by keeping up appearances on social media. That's what it looked like to me. Obviously, I wish the guy the best of luck. It's a horrible injury. Never want it to happen to anyone, but In terms of training one arm, like if you've injured, like if you're asking me, like if you're injured and what you would do, then yeah, I think it's positive. I think as long as you get the all clear from the doctor and as long as you're not doing anything too crazy, it's good to keep your other arm working and doing something, assuming one arm is out of commission. Yes, I do think it's a decent idea. I just think in this case, he perhaps wasn't exercising in moderation, as is typified by his behavior in the first place. Question by Ahmed. Does depression or anxiety affect your style of workout? Yeah, dude. To a certain extent, it probably does. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I don't know what it was that set me off thinking about it, but I think I was working in with some powerlifter in the gym, and he was getting really amped up. And I remember thinking how I used to get amped up when I was younger. And I remember, thinking that actually when I was a kid, like when I was 18, 20, 22, 25, whatever, like I used to get really amped up. Like, I would be training on a lot of emotion and not anything in particular. Like, I didn't have a amazingly bad childhood. Like everyone has, their ups and downs, right? But I did lose my father when I was a lot younger. He passed away. So I think there was a lot of anger and like just sadness there. And I think I channeled a lot of that into my powerlifting in my early days. And it meant for some very explosive lifting. And I was almost sort of addicted to that high of training. I've often thought this actually. I've often thought like a lot of my early powerlifting, one of the reasons why I was so good at powerlifting when I first started was that I was so explosive, because I trained on emotion so much. It wasn't even just anger either. I mean, everyone loves to say it's anger, but it was just highly emotionally charged. I could summon those demons like at will, and it became therapeutic in a sense, because once I had done the workout, and I just felt better again. And I was actually known to be very level-headed when I was younger, just like I am now. But I think a lot of that was just me dumping my emotions, from the gym. And I often wonder if I would have been quite as good as explosive a lifter as I was if I didn't have that sort of early negativity in my life. I don't know. So yeah, in terms of since then, I've not had many issues in that area. But last year in 2020, I did suffer some anxiety. I wouldn't say depression, but I did suffer some anxiety for some life events that happened in my life. And I think it did affect my workouts. And I think I did go back to lifting angry again. And I knew I was, and it felt good to do that because it was therapeutic. It allowed me to just, in one sort of instant, just boom, just get it all out. And I didn't have to carry that around with me for the rest of the day. And it felt therapeutic. So I think it's something which, channeled correctly, it can help. Yeah. When you think about it, it's just the unfairness of life sometimes can cause you to feel anxiety, anger, just highly emotionally charged. I won't say anger because it's not an accurate representation of the emotion. It's just being highly emotionally charged. I don't like to feel highly emotionally charged, right? I like to feel very mellow throughout the day, and that's what I aim for because I work with people, I talk to people all the time, and that's usually the best way to do it. So I think anxiety and depression can affect your workout. If you can channel those emotions correctly, then you can really benefit your workout. Ultimately, though, what you'll need to do, I'm speaking on a personal level, is you'll need to actually deal with your demons, and you'll need to deal with the reasons for why you're anxious or depressed. If it's something you can change, if it's a hormonal issue, it's something you'll need to kind of get checked out. But it's not something I would recommend because it's just better not to feel that way. I'm sure when I was younger, there were probably people, like older people my age, looking at me thinking, that guy's got some demons, because it's a sport which allows you to do that because everything is released in that one sort of instant. Hey, at least you're not going around fighting people, so that's a plus, right? But I think ultimately for yourself, you'll need to address why these things are happening. But that's a bit of honesty from me there. There you go. So next question. Is lifting twice a week enough to make good progress if effort and all that are at a good level? In context, I work at manual labor. Yes, definitely. Devrim, definitely. Yeah, I think if I was having someone train twice a week, I would probably do a full body routine. You don't need to go crazy with the volume. As I say to everyone else, do enough that it allows you to progress. So start low. Start with doing the kind of workout where you can do your full body in a reasonable amount of time, like an hour, okay? And just start there. Now, if that means doing one set for squats, one set for deadlifts, one set for press, one set for chin, cool, just do that, okay? Now, later, if you find that, okay, I'm not progressing week to week, then consider adding volume. And if time becomes an issue, then look at, okay, well, how can I add volume in ways which are more time efficient? Like I gave you some examples earlier in the video, was drop sets, supersets, giant sets. These are all things that you can do, okay, which to increase the amount of time increase the amount of sets you can do in a given time. Antagonistic supersets, where you do like chest and back, for example, or whatever, they're very useful. And in a full body context, you can superset, I don't know, squats with curls or squats with delts. So that's the kind of thing I would look at. But yeah, you can absolutely make progress. What I would say is this: pick a handful of exercises which are big and basic, start with a low amount of volume, and then just see when you stop progressing. If you stop progressing, and my rule of thumb is you stop progressing and you feel okay, add volume. If you stop progressing and you feel sore, reduce volume. Dead easy. Volume is a lever to manipulate. What really matters is adding weight to the bar. If you can add weight to the bar, great. And you can definitely do that. I mean, the science on it says you can literally get stronger with one set. Like, you get something like 80% of the benefit with just doing the first set. The rest of it is optimality. That's what we all argue about all day. I say we, I try not to, but a lot of very important people in the space who like to listen to their own voices like to argue about that a lot. Next question from John. John's an old friend of mine. Macros for older lifters over 50, training by, and also training by percentage of 1 rep max. Let's firstly discuss the macros thing. John, I don't actually use macros with the majority of my lifters. Some of them who enjoy macro tracking, then it's more viable. Some people like to have a limit. Some people like to have the security of macros. I have a different way of, I have a different system of eating, which I've sort of, I've personally not tracked macros myself for 3 years now. So I've developed a series of rules. I think if you, I know this was not exactly your question, John, but I'm sure John's a regular guy. He's got a family, kids, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure if you could get away with not tracking macros, you probably would. But in any case, just to continue this line of conversation, I think what people like about macros is the security of knowing what their boundaries are. And what people dislike about like intuitive eating, which I hate that term, is that it's all very airy-fairy. It's all very sort of like, hey, eat what you like, sort of kind of hippie-ish. Like, eat what you like based on your emotions. Like, motherfucker, if I was basing it on my emotions, I would be covered in chocolate right now. So basically, people need a system of eating. And so what I do with my system when I teach my clients is I teach them a system of eating without macros and calories. Macros and calories still matter. Like, calories versus calories, that's still a thing. But I don't think you should be whipping out your phone for MyFitnessPal every time you sit down to eat with your family. It's a little bit, frankly, that in itself is a little bit disordered. So yeah, but macros for older lifters. John, for yourself, you've got, like I would say to anyone who's working with macros, start at a base. So track your macros for 2 weeks, track your body weight for 2 weeks, see what happens. If you go up and you don't want to go up, reduce. Okay. If you stay still and you want to stay still, maintain. If you go up and you want to go down, drop the calories down. So it has to start with you as an individual. All the coach does, all I do is facilitate knowledge, gathering data on you. So that's kind of what I would say to that. And also, training by percentage of 1 rep max. Again, not a massive fan, not anymore. I know it's very popular in the type of circles we used to run in, John, like the whole Shaco, Smolov, all that kind of stuff. But it's not something that I really program or I'm really anyway concerned about now at all. I generally use rep maxes and rep ranges and getting stronger in those rep ranges, because you don't necessarily need to know a percentage of 1 rep max if you're trying to just get a stronger squat. If you're trying to get a stronger squat, you probably need to be doing some low rep squatting at some point. If you're trying to get bigger legs via a big squat, then you don't necessarily need those lower reps. The research is quite clear that you're going to get muscle stimulation along a whole wide continuum of rep ranges. But the ranges, the reps between 1 to 5 are probably going to give you a bit more strength than they are growth. And the reps from 5 to 15 are probably going to give you a little bit more growth than they are strength. Voila. That's it. So yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that, and it doesn't need to be more complicated. So I don't tend to complicate it anymore. So if it was you, John, and I was coaching you, I would set you up with a way of eating that allowed you to eat flexibly throughout the day without tracking calories. And also, if we were training and it was training for general muscle size, I would have you doing reps of predominantly between 5 to 15 and looking at the schedule which fits you and your lifting. If that's just twice a week, then great, we would do twice a week. But whatever it is, that's kind of how I would figure it out with clients. As a coach, you always start with the individual, and then you push out from there into, optimality and science and all that kind of stuff. But it has to start with what the individual can do. All right, next question. Is dynamic warm-up necessary? No, I haven't done dynamic warm-up for years. I used to do a little bit when I was powerlifting, leg swings, squats, bouncy kind of squats. But no, I don't think so. I think a general warm-up is a good idea. Like, I walk to the gym, it takes me about 20 minutes. So that's a good warm-up for me. I think if you're driving to a gym, it's probably a good idea to at least get on the treadmill or the elliptical for about 5 or 10 minutes. It's extra steps, then you crack on. And Yeah, but dynamic warm-up, no, I don't think so. I think it would be useful to do a dynamic warm-up if you have some flexibility issues that you're trying to work around. So squat is a common one, isn't it? So people who do the leg swings, squats, their knee kicks and all that kind of stuff for getting flexibility and getting themselves ready for a squat. Sure, that's good. In general, though, nowadays, even at my age now, I can just go into the gym and squat. Fine. I mostly think that unless there's an actual issue there which you're trying to correct, you can maintain your flexibility just via simply doing the activity that you're trying to maintain flexibility on. Like me squatting every week or every 2 weeks is enough to maintain flexibility for squatting. I mean, I gave up squats for a long time, but I come back to it now and I'm still just as flexible. So yeah, if you're doing it for flexibility, I would say have a plan, do it for a period of time. After that time, evaluate whether it's necessary for you. Like, are you doing the dynamic warm because you think that's what needs to be done, or are you doing it simply because are you doing it because it's effective, or are you doing it because you're now in the habit of doing it and it's hard to get out of the habit? The next question. All right, we've done this. Okay. Bulboo says, how many sets per body part per week would you say is a good range? I train full body 3 times a week and have 75 minutes to train in one session. Time-wise, I can't fit in too many sets. Yeah, I mean, it's a very popular question. I must do a video about this with volume because I guess it's something which people are really paying attention to these days, but I don't think it's actually wise to overly focus on it. You should start with a minimum and only increase volume. Start with what you can fit into your gym session. If you've got 75 minutes, which is plenty of time, by the way, then start there, okay, and do that for a while. See if you're progressing. If you're not progressing, then change based on you not progressing. You don't need to have this perfect set of volume and set and rep scheme to begin with. You just need to start in the time that you've got. So if that means doing, I don't know, what are we doing? Say chest, back, delts, bis, tris, quads, hams, calves. 8, right? 8, and let's say you're doing 3 sets per body part. So that's 24 sets. That's reasonable in 75 minutes. Now, if you do that and you've got, say, 3 sets each on 3 days a week, I think that's what you said, isn't it? 3 times a week, that's 9 sets per body part per week. Now, that's not the magic 10 to 20, but if you're progressing, what do you care, right? If you're progressing and you're progressing in the 5 to 15 rep range for building muscle, what do you care? Doesn't matter. If you land at a 140 kilo bench press, whether you're doing 9 sets or whether you're doing 20 sets, it's still going to have the same result in the end. You're still going to be just as big. Remember, volume is a lever. That's all it is. Strength progression is always the target. Getting huge and jacked is always the target. The volume is just allows you to add weight to the bar. Volume is not the end goal. So start low, do what you can in the time you have, and when you stop progressing, that's when you evaluate volume. But to begin with, do what you can in the time you have. That is plenty of time. Right, I'll do one more question, then I'll hop off. Bilal says, Faz, I'm very prone to injury. I try my best to be very meticulous with form. Something has to bug me. It's like I have to live with chronic pain as a 22-year-old feeling like 50. The worst part of this is I see a lot of juiced up gurus with stupid form and they tend not break a joint. Okay. Yeah, I guess with this, Bilal, I would possibly, if you're feeling chronically sore, I mean, this was answered, I think your coach is addressing this, so I'll just address it as a general point to anyone. Okay, so rather not to Bilal. As a general point to anyone, if you're constantly feeling sore, it's not a good sign. Okay, I would rather we look at exercises you're using. I would rather we look at maybe either generally, right? It's going to be more variety and safer variations. That's the key. Okay, so very, very thickly boned people can train 3 times a week on the same exercise. Your Bill Stars and all that kind of stuff, they can train on, say, squats 5x5 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, come rain or fall. Most of us can't. Like, most of us need, and the changes that we have to implement are always to do with more variety and more easier variations. So let's say you're training, I don't know, twice a week on whatever you're doing. And let's say you're doing, let's look at legs, for example. Let's say legs are one day you're doing squats, next day you're doing leg presses and front squats. I don't know, just as an example. And if you're getting sore knees, that's not a good sign. Like, you may need to switch that up. Like, you may need to go down from, say, leg presses to leg extensions, see how that works out for you. Or front squats, sissy squats, see how that works out for you. And then all of a sudden your issues might clear up. So you might think, okay, I feel okay now. So I would always move in the continuum. At the left of the continuum is all the big lifts all the time. As you move further along the continuum, it's more variety and easier variations. You still work just as hard. Those variations are just less taxing on your joints. That's the general rule of thumb. So if you want to maintain a twice-a-week schedule, which is a good idea, then yeah, choose easier variations as you go along. I happen to think like cleverly programmed full body routines are a great example of this. One person can write a full body routine and it can be an absolute disaster. Another person can write it and they understand the intricacies of the different recovery systems in the body, like your muscles recover faster than your joints, and then they plan around that, and that's an intelligently performed, executed routine. So yeah, I think it's a key point. As I say, short answer is more variety, easier variations, work just as hard. Right, folks, I am going to call it. No, what? Let's do one more. Let's do one more. From your coaching experience, is it harder to get skinny people to eat a lot of calories to bulk up, or is it harder to get fat people to eat in a deficit to lose fat? Definitely the latter. Definitely the latter. Because skinny people who want to bulk up are generally not out looking for a coach. Most skinny people are just happy being skinny because they do a bit of weights and they get a bit of definition and they're happy. Most skinny people that I know who are like just excessively skinny, they'll train, they'll eat, and then that's it. They're usually happy. They're not that interested. Usually when people are fat or skinny fat, that's when they hire coaches. That's when they really want to. Most people don't have it to the point where they want to go from being skinny to being something else. I don't know why that is. I imagine there's some psychological, some social stuff related to that. I think, yeah, it seems to be more a case that I get more clients who are skinny fat to fat than I do who are skinny. It's rare that I get clients who are very, very skinny. I mean, it's great with them, eating more, cool. It can be hard to eat. I've got one guy who's prepping right now for a bodybuilding show later in the year, and it's hard for him to eat a lot of food. But he's still got a good amount of size, because the good thing about being skinny is those short phases of the year where you can gain some size, you tend to hold on to it pretty well. The fat guy, unless there's some major changes to a lifestyle, a lot of times goes back to being fat. And there you go. Not that it's an impossible story, because it's not. I mean, people stay lean. But unless there's a high degree of education there, I'm talking about your average guy will usually go back to being fat, do that over the course of many years, get sick of it, and that's when they finally go, I'm going to hire Faz, and he's going to sort me out. So yeah, I think normally it's the skinny fat to fat people that are getting coaches. The skinny people, they tend to look pretty good once they've done training for a few months or for a couple of years. They tend to fill out a little bit, and they go, oh, I've got that, skinny but wiry kind of modelly kind of look around me. I look fine. I look great. In fact, those are the type of people who go onto Instagram and start selling coaching. Because look at me, I've got some muscles, I'm shredded. Like, yeah, you kind of always were, and it takes no effort. So, but those are the kind of people who tend to be really bad coaches. There you go. All right, one last one. This is from Terrence. People make lifting way harder than it has to be, in my humble opinion. Terrence is a bit of a legend. Like, he says humble, but he's built really well, and he's got some good lifts on him. Steve Shaw, listened to you and Steve Shaw for a number of years now, and knowing he is correct, you're the man, Fast. Thank you very much, Terrence. Terrence, I appreciate your continued support. And what Terrence is saying there is, it's a lot less complicated than people make out. When I first started lifting in 2000 or 99, whenever it was, there was such a sparse lack of information out there that it became very difficult to know what to do. Nowadays, there is so much BS out there. You have I'm not going to go and name names, but you have so many people, even on YouTube, who are just full of it. And who are either like mistaking themselves, or either at the end of their career and they've built lots of muscle already and they're talking about things which aren't actually building muscle. They lack context. Or you've got people who are out and out lying, like selling you, herbal teas and all that kind of rubbish. You get a lot of crap out there, basically. So be wary. Yeah. If it falls heavily outside the paradigm of calories matter or progressive overload is king, you've got to be very cautious about that. If people are, that's kind of like my shit test. If people are going way outside of that, then I'll be like, okay, hold on. Let's maybe look at what they're saying, because we might want to avoid them. Right, folks, I'll call it there for today. There are more. So I'll see you tomorrow.